Now, who are the guys that are not calling plays? Okay? You had Nick Sirianni, took his team to the NFC Championship game this year. They completely collapsed down the stretch. You have Mike Tomlin, who does not call plays, offense or defense. You have Dan Campbell, does not call offense or defense. And you have John Harbaugh, who does not coach offense or defense. So I bring this up because if you go back and look through, and we know how important it is to hire a strong coordinator, but my opinion, you're going to have a hard time if Brian Callahan leaves unless you're just going to promote Dan Pitcher, and it would be his first time ever as an offensive coordinator, which means it would be his first time potentially ever for calling plays in the National Football League as a very, very young man. Zach Taylor's a very, very young man. But do you think for a second, if Brian Callahan leaves and Pitcher becomes the offensive coordinator, that they're going to let him call plays next year? Think about what Harbaugh's done, right? Todd Monken goes out, hires the best coach, offensive coach in college football from Georgia. Says, you're our guy. Let's make this work for Lamar. And look what's happened, right? On defense, he did the same thing. Brought in Mike McDonald. And both of them were top 10 units in virtually every category there is, right? Okay, so where am I getting at? You look through the years, whether it was Marty Mooringwig, Mark Trestman, Gary Kubiak, Jim Caldwell, Cam Cameron. These are some of the biggest names in football in a long time as offensive coaches. Harbaugh's burned through all of them. He's always in pursuit of coming to the end of a year and examining where do we need to get better. Do you think that Zach Taylor would be making a mistake by continuing to call plays for this franchise and become more of the CEO type like everybody else, well, like a lot of other guys are, and just manage the team? Because he's done a brilliant job at that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. 3 of the 4 final teams have a coach calling plays on one side or the other, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd be talking about guys, though, I mean, with a ton more experience as far as calling plays.
Right.
I mean, Shanahan's done it. Yeah, he did it for 8 or 9 years as an offensive coordinator.
2 of the 4, so half.
Right. So half of them don't, and the other 2 that do are Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan. Now, their track records speak pretty well to their ability to do this, and they've done it for a long, long time.
Sure.
Zach Taylor had never done it until he became a head coach.
Well, he did it for UC.
I was getting ready to say, except for the brutal University of Cincinnati Bearcats offense.
In one of the worst offenses in UC program history.
But they don't have the kind of players then that they have in more recent years, in fairness to him. What do you think?
Well, when we're talking about Andy Reid play calling, it is strictly what's being called on the field, and that's also what Zach Taylor does. Oh, sorry, wrong camera. That is also what Zach Taylor does. Brian Callahan was in charge of installing the game plan, creating the scheme, and I'm sure Zach Taylor had something to do with it as well, but that's what Brian Callahan it was for. And I'm sure that's what we're going to go to here in just a second, where this all shakes out if Brian Callahan leaves. Zach Taylor calling the plays, I don't feel like my issue is actually what takes place on the field more times than not. It's actually what the scheme is. It's actually what the philosophy is. Now, I think that can change next year because we've seen what it looks like when we've got a backup quarterback and we start running the ball more often. I think they might have learned their lesson that they need to be more balanced moving forward. So for me, I don't feel like it needs to change. He's been able to get us to the AFC Championship game twice in a row, got us to the Super Bowl. It's tough to say. I think that if they were to look at improving, I don't know if you hire within. And I like Dan Pitcher. I think he's a great quarterback coach. I think he coached for Aaron Rodgers. He's got a great track record. But I want I want an offensive mind that's not in the building to run the scheme.
I agree. Yeah, that's actually a good point, Casey. That if they are going to have a new offensive coordinator, it would be nice to have a different set of eyes, right? It'd be nice to get somebody that hasn't been in there. But we're going to talk about this a lot, and this has been the biggest complaint towards Zach Taylor. He's got to give up the play call, right? That's what everyone says. And when it comes to this point where in a team that I feel passionately about almost everything, I don't feel passionate either way on this. If Zach Taylor gives up the play call, that's fine. Right? I don't. But also Zach Taylor has been the author, along with Joe Burrow, of 2 of the best quarterback years in franchise history.
Yep.
2 of the best offensive years in franchise history. And people want to point out, well, what about the postseason? Like, they didn't score a whole lot of points in the postseason. All right, they're 5-2 in the postseason under this regime. So I'm not necessarily so quick to jump on the trigger of we need something to change. We need something to change, because this team still was 9-8 playing one of the hardest schedules in NFL history with a healthy quarterback for only 5 or 6 games, right? So I'm not necessarily so quick to jump on that bandwagon of we need to change something, because as I've stated 1,000 times so far since being on this show, and I'll state it 1,000 more times, I don't think there's a more tired take that NFL fans have than the play calling's terrible. Every single fan of every single team hates their team's play calling. There are Kansas City Chiefs fans that are arguing this year that Andy Reid needs to give up the play calling.
Right.
There are San Francisco 49er fans this year that are arguing that Kyle Shanahan needs to give up the play calling. It's the most tired take that we as fans have, so I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of Zach Taylor needs to give it up when he was the author, along with Joe Burrow, of the 2 best quarterback years in franchise history.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm just the only question I'm asking is basically what Casey said. Is he doing his job as the CEO head coach? Because, again, if Brian Callahan leaves, there is no – I mean, you can just stop this conversation right now. There is no way on God's earth that Zach Taylor is going to go hire an offensive coordinator from outside of this organization, a Todd Monken kind of a guy. They're not going to do it. They're not going to pay somebody big money like you'd have to do, the Gary Kubiaks, those guys of the world. You're not going to do it. They're going to promote from within. And maybe Dan Pitcher turns out to be the next greatest offensive coordinator in the history of the league, but you can't be that if you're not calling plays. Right?
Yeah, and to be fair, Dan Pitcher does deserve a chance to be an OC somewhere, but I just...
Well, I would bet that Callahan would bring him.
That could be true. We haven't even discussed that possibility of who he could poach from our staff. That would be very interesting. And not to mention that Dan Pitcher still might get an OC job somewhere else.
That's right.
So, I mean, my hope for the Bengals is that Zach Taylor gives someone outside the organization a chance, just because it brings a different perspective. And I think that you always need a new, fresh set of eyes. And I even say the same thing really about the defense too. We've had the same scheme probably for 5 years now, 4 years.
4 years.
And I think it's starting to get exposed a little bit without stellar backfield play. And we might not ever get a top 3 safety again. You know what I mean? You never know what the roster will shake out to be moving forward. So I might want another set of eyes there as well. I'm not saying completely get rid of Ludini, but I am saying that there might be a change, some staff changes, right?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that made me wonder about, we were talking last week or the last couple of weeks about the Bengals' inability to play smash mouth football and win games inside their division, that they were better built to compete once they reach the postseason with the likes of Kansas City and Buffalo, primarily. Right. I got to tell you, after watching the NFL playoffs this weekend, it's becoming a bully game again. Kansas City can run the ball. Buffalo can run the ball, right? San Francisco can run the ball. Detroit can run the ball. These teams are all in. They've got quarterbacks on various levels, from the great to the, the Jared Goff, wherever you want to put him. But now, for the second time, to Goff's credit, he's been to as many championship games now as Burrow has been to. This will be his second, right?
Right.
He led his team to a Super Bowl. They got beat, shipped him off out of town, and now he's the king of the jungle in Detroit. But I just kept thinking of that while I'm watching the third and fourth quarters of games over the weekend. And teams just pounding away, pounding away, pounding away. Yeah, you got Josh Allen. Yeah, you got Lamar Jackson. Yeah, you got Purdy. Yeah, you got Goff. But it's a bully league again. And when you start looking at this Bengals window that we hear so much about all the time, as it comes to the teams that are in the Final Four, what do they have in common? Okay, now Detroit's defense, they're okay. But they can get after the quarterback, right?
Right.
They're not great in the secondary, but they give their secondary a chance by crowding the passer, right? San Francisco defense, San Francisco, right? Ravens, Chiefs, and all can run the ball. The Bengals don't have either one of those things right now. That could change in 6 months from now. But right now, they can't stop the run. Their defense was one of the worst in the league, and they cannot run the ball. And they have no commitment to running the ball. You can sit there and blame Joe Mixon all you want. Joe Mixon, with a decent commitment to the run game, he rushed for 1,000 yards on a brutal rushing yard team.
Yeah.
If they committed to the run in more games, Joe Mixon is plenty good enough to run for 12 or 1,300 yards in a season. You mean to tell me over 17 games, he can't pick up another 20 to 25 to 30 yards rushing, which would have put him in that 1,100, 1,200 bracket?
I mean,
They don't need to go change running backs.
No.
I agree.
They need to get some people who are committed to playing smash mouth football, because moving forward, if you look at the age of this Kansas City defense, it is one of the youngest defenses in recent memory. It is incredible how young they are, and they've done it all through the draft. They let Hill walk out the door, and they spent all those draft picks on defense, and they hit the lottery with them. So, we're sitting here talking about the Bengals competing in their division. Kansas City and Buffalo have made a transformation right before your very eyes. It was 2 years ago we're talking about how bad Kansas City's defense is. Now they're top 5 in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, they are able to adapt and change to the times. Just doing a little quick history of the NFL and how defenses have changed over the years.
Sling it.
Back in the day, back in the Andy Dalton era, that defensive schemes, it was cover 3, which means that there's only one safety in the backfield. You're crowding the box. You're trying to stop the run. Shifted towards a more pass-heavy centric league, right? Mahomes enters in the chat. Teams cannot stop him. They cannot stop them at all. They go to a cover 2 sort of defensive era, which means there's 2 safeties in the backfield. I know it's a little weird because cover 3 is more than cover 2. Yada, whatever. There's 2 safeties in the backfield. It starts limiting the big plays and the big passes moving forward. The league is already caught up to that. It's going back to that cover 3, that smash mouth football, running the ball, back to what it was back when Andy Dalton was around, where you could run the ball half the time and win ball games. The NFL adapts. The best teams adapt. And Kansas City, they were able to run the ball for years now, but they just didn't because that's not what defenses allowed them to do. Same thing with the Bengals and the Super Bowl run. Joe Mixon had 1,300 yards rushing that year, Tom. And he's not changed at all, if you ask me.
I agree.
All the people that said he lost his step, I don't see it. What I saw was the offensive line not being able to block. I saw that. I saw guys that were too slow to get to the second level, climb up to the linebackers, make open holes for Joe Mixon. I saw that. Because you look at Joe Mixon and what he's done this year, there's just no reason we didn't give him the ball more. Just no reason at all. I think the Bengals just were too slow to the adapt, to the change of what this league has turned into.
Well, like, so yeah, this is going to keep happening in football, right? There's only so many ways you can play football. And I know that there's still some evolution to the game and stuff like that, like the RPOs and the zone reads that have come out in the last 10, 15 years. There's going to be those small innovations. But for the most part, it's the same game that's going to be played. It's just counter punch and punching, right? Punch and counter punch. And when every team was playing smash mouth football, some teams came out and said, all right, we're going to sling it around the field. They had a lot of success. Other teams go, why can't we do that? They start doing it. So now it comes back, hey, let's start running it up the gut. Let's start delivering the box. Casey alluded to the reasons that happened. That's going to continue to happen. So is the trend now, right, smash mouth football, as Tom, you alluded to? Maybe. Could be. But I brought this point up when it comes to the AFC North that I think if we try to mold ourselves to what the Baltimore Ravens are, or what the Cleveland Browns are, and what the Pittsburgh Steelers are, yeah, we might fare a little better in our division because we went 1-5 this year. Although I would argue that we've won the division the last 2 years. But as I've alluded to, like, I think that limits what the Bengals' possibilities are based on the personnel. You look at what the Ravens have. They have a running quarterback. Because they have a running quarterback, they got themselves some fullbacks. They got themselves some power guys, right? Because that's what we're going to do, smash mouth football. The Pittsburgh Steelers are smash mouth football because they don't have anybody that they trust to sling the skin around the field. Not a single soul. Cleveland Browns, similar ordeal, right? They weren't this same smash mouth football when they had Baker Mayfield. They like to throw the ball a little more when they had Baker Mayfield. Now they have Deshaun Watson. He was supposed to solve their problems. They go, all right, I think we're a better team when we just turn around and hand it off to Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, or whatever. I think we're a better team when we do that. The Bengals have a different personnel group than the rest of the AFC North. If we try to mold ourselves to the way that they style, the way that they play, I think you limit the capabilities and the potential of the Cincinnati Bengals. I simply do.
Well, you might be right, but I think at the same time, what you also do is by committing to getting up under center and running the ball more, which we see the Bills do, which we see the 49ers do, which, not so much under center for Kansas City, Buffalo, but they're still running the ball. Ran all over the first 3 quarters of the game last night, that Kansas City defense. You give your quarterback a chance to play a full year.
Hey there, thanks for watching our video. If you like our stuff, like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see more of our content, check out this video and check out this video.